Welcome to this EDUcast, always on insights for Microsoft Teams, sponsored by Virsae and Telecom Reseller. I'm Gary Audin, and with me today is Ross Williams, Chief Product Officer at Virsae. Our agenda today is going to cover things like accessing Microsoft Teams, what are the problems of connecting to Microsoft Teams and their impact, defining the problems, looking at the 10 most common causes of these problems, the Virsae solution, business impact of poor quality, and a CEO case study. So let's start off with the first slide. The growth of Microsoft Teams has stimulated the need for collaboration performance management. Ross, tell us about Teams and all the network technologies that can be used to access the Teams application.
Well, that's the beauty of these cloud applications, isn't it, Gary? That they go with you wherever you travel to. And there's a bunch of different technologies that we've got on the screen there that can be used to connect. But really, essentially, it comes down to, if you have an internet connection, you can access Teams, you can access your cloud applications. The one thing I'd like to point out on this screen though is that the majority of these connectivity technologies don't support quality of service. So that means a real problem for real-time applications like voice and video right from the get-go.
Should the performance issues with Teams be blamed on Teams?
Well, it's the same for all of the cloud providers, and Microsoft's no different. Inside their cloud environments, so for example with Teams, once your audio stream or your video stream makes it into their cloud environments, there's never going to be a problem. Those Azure data centers that Microsoft use, they're fiber connected, their own networks are huge, they run quality of service. So within those cloud providers networks, you commonly you don't get an issue. They're engineered so well, and they're so performant. The real issue is in getting to those networks in the first place from wherever you are as you move around, working from anywhere. A lot of people are working from home now. It's the getting to those networks, getting to the ingress egress points of those cloud providers networks. That's actually where the problems with quality generally lie.
Now we have the problems. Work from home is a very common problem. What are the impacts to these employees when Teams doesn't perform well?
Well, as the screen shows there, Gary, the key thing is that Metrigy found is that more than half of work from home employees try to troubleshoot their own issues. So when they're getting quality problems, and it could be their network, could be their Wi-Fi, could be their audio devices, any number of things. But the key thing is that you've got non-specialist people with a little bit of rudimentary knowledge trying to troubleshoot what's really a complex issue, and it really is something that should be dealt with by the UC specialists within the IT teams.
Now, when people have problems, all right, what are the reactions? What happens? It's not just that it doesn't work. They do something in response. What do they do?
Well, frustration is the key one, and we're living in a world where there's intense labor shortages all over the world. And your best people are always trying to do their best and be the best that they can. If they're being held back by the technology, they know there's labor shortages, they know there's other opportunities for them out there, and it can cause your best people to churn, which of course is really, really bad for businesses. But you've also got other downsides to this as well. The adoption of something like Microsoft Teams, it really provides the business with an opportunity to transform the way they communicate, both internally and externally. There's much simpler ways to collaborate than there's ever been available before. And one of the worst things is those collaboration tools aren't taken up, simply because every time, or often a user experiences problem when they're trying to use video or they're trying to do screen sharing. They run into problems, so they don't operate that way, and they go back to sort of using just plain old telephony, which is a real waste for the business. There's that investment, but there's also the the opportunity cost of not using those collaboration tools.
Now, Metrigy did a number of surveys for you. What did they discover when they surveyed the home workers?
Well, they discovered that everyone working from home is experiencing impacts on their real-time communications in particular. So you can see there that almost half of people are experiencing poor video from time to time. Around about a third get poor voice performance from time to time. And even some of them have even sort of pinpointed that the actual cause is their home internet connection. And they'll be pinning that on the home internet connection because, in a hybrid situation, they go to the office and things work nicely. When they're at home, they don't. And that's, that is a clear indication of where the problems do occur, as we touched on before.
Would you continue with the Metrigy survey? And what are the most likely issues that Teams performance reports?
So we are seeing, and this is the IT teams answering this particular part of the survey. They're saying that more than a third of IT teams say that work from home, or in particular Wi-Fi, is a major challenge, and they would have found this out if they don't have the necessary visibility. They would have worked this out from just the patterns around what people are saying and perhaps how they've managed to resolve some of those problems. But again, looking at from the IT perspective, voice and video problems are a real issue, and in fact, managing those remote networks is actually the challenge. Prior to the work at home and the hybrid working era, when most people were in the enterprise, those same IT teams had very simple access to the people, to the networks that they were running on. Those networks were highly controlled in terms of security and standards and QoS and so forth. And now people are working remotely. That's completely flipped on its head, and you've got the opposite situation. So the IT teams are trying to support end users that are working on networks that they often can't see and can't manage, and that's the real problem. So they kind of end up guessing at what the resolution is to these problems, and that can take a lot of time, and means your mean time to repair or get someone operating smoothly is either really long, or in a lot of cases it's just non-existent. It's we can't really help you.
On this slide, it says 30% of enterprises have invested in new management tools. Does that mean the tools they had were not adequate?
Yeah, that's quite right, Gary. As I said before, the tool sets for enterprises used to be aimed at those enterprise networks, and there's a lot of discipline around that and a lot of good skills in supporting enterprise networks. The home workers, the remote workers, moved away off those managed networks to a network that, in most cases, IT can't see. So with their standard tools, so that they're having to put something different in that gives them visibility, right out to that endpoint.
When a user complains about Teams performance, there are many ways in which they can describe the problem. Do user complaints really describe the problem well?
That's one of the issues, is that user complaints. And a lot of guys that work in IT will tell you that often the end user won't tell you what is actually wrong. They kind of direct you into sometimes down a bit of a blind alley. They give you an opinion, which is why it's so important to do things like pick up those customer surveys. So at the end of a call, Teams does it. A number of the cloud providers provide that post-call survey where the end users get the opportunity to effectively fill in a trouble ticket, and a lot of those Teams in particular directs the users to a sort of a checkbox system, and then they can tick those boxes and report through very accurately what their experience was, which is really helpful for IT teams to pick up from those and hit the ground running in terms of resolving those issues. You've also got that situation where about 90% of users don't report their quality problems. So making that post-call survey effective, like as in picking it up and actually, getting that content, feeding it into your service desk so that people can deal with the problems is really key. Giving them a way to easily report those problems, because let's face it, no one wants to take 30 minutes out of their day to talk to the service desk and answer a whole bunch of questions and get involved in testing themselves directly.
Now with your system, you found a lot of common problems. What are the top 10 causes of problems that you've discovered?
Yeah, Gary, we put this list together, and it's in no particular order. But the causes of a poor quality interaction, come down to these top 10 things usually. We touched on that before, the poor performing Wi-Fi networks. That is an absolute fact. And if people live in a high density urban area where there's a lot of Wi-Fi systems, you're getting contention for bandwidth and channel utilization. So, these things are real. But also, like in the another example there, cause 4 in the Teams world, if you don't have the connectivity correct, and your audio streams can travel all over the world to far-flung places in the cloud environment. If you don't have that end-to-end connectivity on the right ports, voice will drop back from UDP to TCP, which is not designed for real-time communications, and that usually leads to a bad experience. And that's a connectivity issue. Long pairing distance to the XCAD solution. That's what I mentioned before about keeping your path to the ingress/egress point of the network, keeping that as short as possible. Really is key to good quality as well. And of course, you've got the audio devices that are many and varied, and the users behavior when they're using those audio devices too can lend quite a clue to what's going on.
Where does Virsae's artificial intelligence solution fit into the performance analysis?
Well, the thing is, there is so much data being produced by these environments, Gary. So not only like out of the graph API, but also things like session border controller and the home network itself and the audio devices that are in it. So Virsae is bringing all of those data points together and relating them all into a real-time interaction. And you end up with thousands of data points. So for example, I looked at a recent internal Teams meeting that we had. We had a bunch of people on from the US and from New Zealand and from Europe on that call. When I looked at the output from the Graph API, there's over 32,000 data points produced by Microsoft relating to that particular meeting. And on top of that, we've got all those other things that I mentioned. So for a human to work through that amount of data, to pick out the patterns and work out what's actually going wrong, absolutely impossible. You've just got to have something machine powered. You've got to have artificial intelligence or machine learning involved to pick out those patterns. These things are relatively simple, but they are buried very deep inside a huge amount of data.
This picture is really good in that it really defines the end-to-end performance analysis. Would you describe how Virsae's service management operates from end to end in the performance analysis?
So we've recently released VSM Everywhere, which is as the name would infer, we'd like that to be installed everywhere. It's an always-on application that runs on the end user's workstation. So that provides us with access to what's going on in that home network. So all the diagnostics to do with Wi-Fi or wired connections, performance and connectivity through the ISP to the XCAS player. Going the other way, the health of Bluetooth connections, for example, with Jabra headsets, we consume their API, and we're able to see things from that Jabra API. For example, is during a real-time session, an audio session or video session, is there noise in the room that the noise cancelling part of that headset can't deal with, which can mean that there needs to be an improved model of headset delivered to that end user to deal with that noisier environment. To ride out the other side, Microsoft themselves have just said at their recent Inspire conference, the vast majority of their customers that are using Teams are using direct routing, which means on the left of that diagram, there's a session border controller hanging out the back of the XCAS platform, which connects into the PSTN. So getting those data points all the way through. So from that connection to the PSTN from the XCAS player. So for example, the Teams Graph API through to the ISP performance, router, home network performance and home workstation, your workstation performance in that home environment, Bluetooth connectivity through to the headset to the room analytics. So a full end-to-end view is necessary to hone in on those top 10 causes of poor quality interactions.
You haven't used the words, but why are you promoting a centralized performance management solution?
Well, quite simply, Gary, that's where the business case is. So we're living in times of high inflation, of labour market shortages all over the world, supply chain disruptions. I mean, all of these things are forcing businesses to look at their pricing. And of course, you increasing your pricing, your customers are going to look around at the competition and see perhaps what they're doing, if they can get a better deal. And if you're not providing the highest level of customer service and keeping your customers happy, they're going to churn. And our metric shows through their figures that the success groups that are deploying centralized management are getting the returns. They are able to grow their revenues, reduce their costs, and increase customer satisfaction. So quite simply, the business case is there, and it's stronger than ever before for centralized management.
According to Metrigy, what are the most positive impacts of centralized performance management?
Well, I really like the way that Metrigy approach their surveys. So they've surveyed recently is over 700 enterprise customers globally to get this information that we're presenting today. Well, this is a very small part of what they've come up with. But the way they do this is they get all those answers to the surveys, but they also look at a company and whether it meets their success criteria. So success criteria is, are they growing? Is their customer service improving? Is their productivity improving? Are they reducing costs? All of those general sort of business KPIs that everyone's looking for. So basically, performing very well and providing improved returns to shareholders. So the companies that meet that are sorted into a group that they call the successful companies, and then they look at the behaviour and what successful companies are doing that companies that aren't successful are not doing, if you like. And they find that the companies in the success group, they are deploying management. They have CX initiatives, of which management is one key one. So they're kind of recognising this is what they need to do to ensure smooth communications and enabling their people to be the best that they can wherever they're working from. So successful companies in their survey, on average, are seeing increases in revenue, improved customer service and productivity, and reduce costs across the business.
We have a CEO use case here. I think things will become clearer by using this use case to demonstrate the value.
Yeah, this is a genuine story, Gary, that we came across. We had a CEO working from home, trying to join a board meeting, something that he'd done many times before. This is a particularly important board meeting, and of course, wouldn't you know it, he's having all sorts of connectivity problems. Can't join, the audio's glitchy, video keeps dropping out, and of course, he's got no idea why. He just knows he needs to be on that call and quick. So he puts a call into the service desk. The service desk was able to look at the information both in real time and historically for his home working environment, and they can see quite a clear pattern there. And quite simply, he was normally connected into a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi connection. This one was 5 gigahertz. For some reason, he was on a different network, and the performance of that network wasn't up to scratch. So there's a lot of packet loss and a lot of interference going on that network. So he was able to be talked through the situation, getting onto that 2.4 gigahertz connection, I think from memory, he just had to move his location a little, and once he connected at 2.4, the problem went away. So very, very simple solution, and it saved a pretty major problem for that particular CEO.
That talks about the performance impact. What's the financial impact?
Again, Gary, this is a genuine case study from one of our customers. If their contact center goes down, it costs them $250,000 in downtime. And of course, there's all the intangible costs outside of having a straight outage, a major outage. If you add up all of the time that end users are spending being frustrated or troubleshooting their own home network environments, trying to get their tech working for themselves, that's got to add up. They're doing that on the company dime typically, and while they're doing that, of course, there's the opportunity cost because they're not concentrating on doing what they should be doing for the business. So time is money, and often it's invisible what's going on to the business. Just a loss of productivity, results.
Virsae Service Management collects billions of data points. How do you do this, and how does it affect the analytics?
Well, said before, Gary, we've got a lot of touch points along this whole end-to-end picture, from the left, from the direct routing scenario, from the connection into the PSTN, all the way to the worker's home network, the cloud player themselves, whether it be Avaya, Teams, RingCentral, Cisco, Genesys. There's a bunch of options out there. 8x8 Zoom. Their networks are generally fine, as we touched on before, but it's all the other part, the connection into the ISP, that home network itself, and how it's performing, how the audio device is performing. So the more data, the better for machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we're feeding all of that into our engine, and we're also arranging that on an interaction basis. So for a Teams interaction, for example, you can drill right down into any of these areas without having to be highly technical whatsoever. So we're kind of making what would normally be a job for a tier 3 engineer, something that a tier 1 or tier 2 person on a service desk can do, just by bringing all those pieces together. That's normally down to a tier 3 person to troubleshoot.
I'd like to point out that the Virsae website is Virsae.com. Their email for sales is on the screen. Also, you notice that they are both on Americas and UK, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific, so they're available all around the world. Thank you very much, Ross. I appreciate the recording of the EDUcast and hope to do another one soon with you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Gary. I've enjoyed it as well.